Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to an event I've been looking forward to all weekend, our Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging panel on inclusion and belonging. You've heard this weekend how important it is to Mortarboard to focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, and even that one of our transformational imperatives on our strategic plan is to emphasize the equity portions of our purpose. And one way we have done that is by standing up an amazing standing DEIB committee that is chaired by my good friend and longtime Mortarboard leader, Candy Hiranaka-Pitts. Candy was instrumental in really setting the vision for this panel or for this committee, which has done so much to enhance the way that we can live out this ideal as an organization, and has challenged us to learn more and be a better organization because of it. And so I won't take much more time other than to thank Candy for all of the work that she's done to prepare for today's discussion and to hand it over to you.
Thanks, Katie. On behalf of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Standing Committee, I'd like to welcome you to the Inclusion and Belonging panel. But before we dive into today's panel discussion, I just wanted to take a moment to reinforce the importance of the work Mortarboard has done with the DEIB. You know, Katie has mentioned how much this is important to us. And there's a lot of things that have happened, and I could read this whole paragraph about the things that we've done, but I think you could do this on your own, because I think it's really important that we take the time today to hear the voices of our panelists and open up questions from those of you attending the session. I also noticed there were some really excellent questions on HUVA, so we might be able to get to that as well. The one thing I did want to talk about is how this started. It was in January of 2020, at the start of our most recent strategic plan, when two collegiate members present pushed our strategic planning committee, saying that we could and should do more to promote the values of DEIB found in our purpose. You saw in our business meeting that one of our transformational imperatives is to emphasize the equity themes of our purpose. The first action then President Gail Harrison Corvette took was to appoint our first ever standing Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. I've had the pleasure and honor of chairing this committee for the past 3.5 years. And during this time, I think we've made some great strides, but as we all know, there is a lot of work to do. Then the committee created the DEIB Toolkit, which I hope you will take time to look at. It's listed in the resources on the Mortarboard website. And just to note that there's a lot of updates that we need to do to the toolkit, but the very first page has some excellent websites, and I think that's a great way to start to get some information that will help your chapters. In interviewing the amazing 2023 DEIB award submissions, we were really impressed by the ingenuity of many of the chapters, and not only the work that they are doing to advance diversity and equity in their respective chapters and on their campuses, but also of the things that they are doing to foster that feeling of inclusion and really belonging. As one of our committee's members stated that, you know, you can have DEI, but until people really feel belong and really appreciated and celebrated, we aren't doing the work. In reading the chapter annual report submitted, we realized that a few of our chapters were really making great strides toward inclusion and belonging. So today's panel will look to highlight the success of their chapters and open a dialogue for others to be able to expand their inclusion and belonging efforts. We are joined today by 3 students from across the country. We'll start with a brief introduction. First, we have Gabriella Wida. She is the current president of the Penetralia chapter at the University of Montana. This chapter created a DEI chair position in their executive board. Next is Tamika Lovelace. She was the JEDI chair for the Jane K. Smith Cap and Gown chapter at San Diego State University. This chapter not only has JEDI, which stands for Justice, Equity, Diversity, Inclusion. They have that as a committee and an executive board position, but they have held several events that Tamika will share. Last, we have Waleed Saoud, who is the former membership chair for the Sally Stedman Azalea chapter at the University of South Alabama. This chapter partnered with the diversity officer on campus to hold a mock selection meeting to ensure the chapter was being inclusive, and they intentionally reached out to diverse student organizations across the campus. These 3 chapters are clearly doing amazing work, and we're thrilled that they are sharing their time with us today to help all chapters make stride towards inclusion and belonging. So panelists, again, I'd like to thank you for being here. We'd like to start off with this first question for all 3 of you. Why did your chapter choose to focus on inclusion and belonging efforts either this year or earlier?
I can start off. Initially, our chapter at SDSU's focus on DEI simply aligned and still does with our national platform's effort to focus on expanding DEI, which they did by creating the very first DEI chairperson position that I got to run for right after my initiation back in 2021. And then afterwards, I made sure that diversity, equity, and inclusion were definitely included in various aspects of SDSU's chapter by like sitting in on our membership selection committees, just to make sure that that concept kind of stayed at the forefront while we were selecting new members and whatnot.
Our chapter was working on inclusion and belonging, partially because we just wanted to create a safe space where our students could come and be together and feel like they were meeting people who were maybe different majors than they were, that they never would have come across on campus, and have a safe space for them to be themselves, to talk to each other. And through that, I think that we ended up fostering inclusion by creating a space where people felt that they could belong with each other.
I would have to agree with like what Gabriella said. It's just like our chapter is pretty big, but we just decided to increase diversity in terms of major, in terms of like underrepresented populations in South Alabama. And so that was our goal. We just wanted everybody to have a chance at being a mortarboard. And that was like our purpose.
Thank you so much. So now we're going to go on to specific things that each chapter has done as outlined in their the end of the year report. So I'm going to start with Gabriella. The chapter at the University of Montana took the initiative by reaching out to the Director of Inclusive Excellence and the Director of Campus Events and Student Life. They created a relationship with groups that focus on DEI and bring people from diverse backgrounds together. Through this avenue, they encouraged people to apply to mortarboard and received applications from a diverse group of students. So Gabriella, can you please talk about how the chapter fostered these relationships and partnerships? What groups in specific did you partner with, and what best practices did you find? And how will you incorporate that approach this coming year?
So those 2 connections were primarily done by our former president, Lexi Smith. And she did a lot of great legwork for us in being able to include those 2 directors for any events that pertain to them, or any events where we are trying to promote mortarboard and let more people know about who we are and what we do. And through that, one of the specific groups that we partnered with was the Pacific Islanders Club. Our campus has a lot of different student groups, and they all host a lot of events that promote their own culture and share them with other students at the university. So we took that as an opportunity to kind of merge our clubs and learn about each other. So learn about things that maybe we never knew from them, and also teach them like kind of what mortarboard does, and allow them to have access to our group and be able to talk with us. And sorry, I totally lost my space, to be honest with you guys. We did this so that we could show that all of our voices mattered in our group. And we plan our events kind of together as a group, instead of like the president and the VP just kind of creating all these events and then the rest of the members follow. Our chapter is relatively small, so we work together as a big group and can decide like which student groups we want to work with, which ones are important, and which campus or community events that we want to be a part of, and kind of create a priority list based upon that. And that kind of makes the space where if one student really wants to be working with one group, they are able to voice that and we can decide on that together. And then in the future, we plan to continue what we're doing. I also hope to partner with the dean of our honors college and get more of our honors college students involved, as well as work with some of our student athletes. I think that they end up getting left out of a lot of student groups because they are so busy. So maybe going to events that they are able to attend and getting them involved.
Thank you so much, Gabriella. I think you heard Gabriella talk about partnerships over and over again. And I think that is key. That's something that we'll address later on about the importance of forming those alliances with other groups on campus. Thank you so much, Gabriella. Next, I'm going to go to Tamika. So Tamika, the chapter at San Diego State University changed its DEI committee name to JEDI, to be inclusive of justice. Tamika, can you please talk about why your chapter did this, and please describe the JEDI events that you held this past year?
Oh, I'm sorry, my computer kind of cut off. I believe you had asked me a question, but it cut off right when you started talking.
So at your chapter, you named your committee, you changed it from DEI to JEDI. So can you please talk about why the chapter had this name change, and then share some of the great events that the JEDI committee sponsored this year?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So during my second term, I was honored to have 4 of our brand new initiates who turned out to be extremely passionate about DEI and immediately wanted to join our committee. And I remember during our first committee meeting, we had a really long discussion about what DEI meant to each of us. And we all came to the conclusion that when it comes to DEI, we wanted to make sure that it wasn't just paying lip service to it. We wanted to make sure that it was a concentrated effort to affect change. And my members, I remember Madalino and Kevin, they were both adamant that justice was a very huge missing component to DEI. It's great to learn about diversity, equity, and inclusion and whatnot, but without that justice piece, without the actions behind it, it becomes more performative and potentially just kind of, like I said, lip service and temporary. So we wanted to make sure that justice was always going to be at the forefront of our ideas when it came to doing anything diversity related. And so that's where Kevin advised us that if we just rearrange letters, we're now the Jedis. And so it really stuck, and we enjoyed being this new JEDI committee. And some of our first ideas as far as events go, initially we had planned on doing another event during the month of October, which I believe was Pacific Islander Asian Awareness Month. And so we had planned on doing a nice little cultural sharing event, but there was a lot that was going into planning. And so the timing wasn't coming out absolutely correct. And so meeting with my wonderful advisor, Randy, she had told us that we can kind of alter it a little bit and kind of make it an entire group, entire member focused event. So we decided to do what we called a cultural share, where all of our members were advised that, hey, we want to learn about each one of us. We wanted to create an experience that bonded us as a group and friends outside of our typical meetings and ceremonies and whatnot. So we did a cultural share, and we sent out notifications and flyers that, hey, sign up to share something about your culture that we can't Google. That was the point. We didn't want anything surface level. We wanted to know something deep about everyone's culture that they wanted to teach us, not what the world wanted to teach us about their culture. And so everyone got the opportunity to share a piece of their culture and to talk about it. And so many great stories came out of it. Me and another member had really similar background stories. I told a story of my dad has a special cake recipe that he gives to no one because this cake has supported my family financially throughout the decades, especially during times before affirmative action and whatnot. Anytime there's an emergency, my family would make this cake to make extra money And the secret was so highly guarded that I didn't get the recipe until being almost 30. And I was like sworn to so many levels of security. And so there was another member of mine who also had a similar story with the Irish soda bread from her grandma, who brought the recipe all the way from Ireland, that it supported them during like times of famine and whatnot. So to see how many connections and similarities these different stories had was a beautiful thing, and everyone loved the cultural sharing event. We even had a member who shared nerd culture and talked about the great when the financial crisis of '08 hit, and how everyone was video gaming and drinking Mountain Dew and pizza. And that was like what he shared with us, pizza and Mountain Dew, because it was a special time. So it was a really, really great, fun event. Everyone loved it. Another event we had actually came by way of, again, my wonderful advisor, Randy. Again, I cannot express enough how much your advisors can help you if you are looking into doing anything DEI related or any events that you have. But our advisor, Randy, has a wonderful international adoptive daughter who is a former student of hers, a couple of former students of theirs. And she actually, they came up with the idea because her daughter, her adoptive daughter, lives and works in Taiwan, teaching English to her college level students. And the concept was to create a network, international network between these different students and universities with Mortarboard and her adopted daughter's students in Taiwan that were learning English. And so we set up kind of a cyber cafe on April 17th, where members of Mortarboard could join a Zoom and speak to students who were going to school in South Korea, Taiwan, and various other places. And it was probably the best event that I think we had all semester. We got to talk to other students who were college students like us, but who lived very different experiences. And I remember something standing out. It was right around the time where eggs were becoming super expensive in the US, and everyone was talking about eggs. And I remember I was discussing with one of the students, and he made a comment like, "Oh, I really miss eggs." And I was like, "Oh, because they're so expensive?" And he was like, "No, there's none on the shelves." And it was mind blowing that something I was kind of taking for granted, because given, although they were like $8 a carton at the time, there were still plenty on the shelves. And I realized like we live such different experiences. They have such different parameters that they live by that we don't even take into account. And I really thought that this World Cafe event was a great eye opener and a great way not only to share cultures, but to gain perspectives on someone else's life and to understand life through a different view. So those were two of the events that we did.
Wow, thank you so much, Tamika. And I would encourage any of you to reach out to Tamika as well, because she probably has more to share. And Tamika mentioned the importance of sharing stories. And I think you find so many connections with sharing stories. And one of my favorite leadership authors has this quote that we don't fear the people whose stories we know. So share those stories. Next, we're going to go to Waleed. So Waleed, not only did the chapter at the University of South Alabama reach out to student organizations across campus known for supporting and promoting diversity, but you also partnered with the vice president of diversity to hold a mock selection to ensure the chapter was considering all DEI factors when selecting the new class. Wally, can you please tell us what that student organization outreach looked like, what impact you think it had on membership and selection? And we're all very interested to hear about the mock selection and what critical factors were discussed and included.
Okay, so I'll first start off with student outreach, and then I'll move on to like mock selection and our speaker. So first, with student outreach, it starts with the members. That's what I'll always say. And most of our members, we have a pretty big chapter. So most of our members, each person is in a different society than another. So we were just like, hey, speak to your society about Mortarboard. and all that. And it just started off at the base level. And then I realized, like, that's not touching all the chapters there are on campus, because some people are not a part of those chapters. So I talked to some of my friends, and I got a contact with the president of the Collegiate 100. And I spoke to him about motorboard. And basically, like, I made, like, me and my committee members, we made a list of like chapters we should go speak to. And from there, and we just hoped for engagement and everything. And also another component that also helped, going off Gabriella, is becoming joint with other chapters. We had our Friendsgiving, and I think this will also help us out a lot. Our Friendsgiving, we had so I got the numbers just recently. It was like 60-ish people RSVP'd, and by the time Friendsgiving happened, and everybody signed in and everything, we were like at 175, which is shocking to see, and like such a great success of an event. And I think that helped with engagement with other members in the university and stuff like that. And just hearing like the motorboard name and associated with such a good event, and just be like, oh, I want to be a part of that organization, like, and stuff like that. And then now I'll go on to mock selection. So we invited Dr. Joel Billingsley, and she came, talked to us about what like diversity, equity, and inclusion was, and like everybody to have that sense of belonging. Like, and so basically what we were talking about beforehand, and what Tamika talked about too, and then from there we played like a game where like you get a piece of paper and you fold it like hot dog style, and in the front you would write what people would first what people like what you think people know about you, like when they first meet you from like a first experience, and then what people will get to know about you after they meet you and stuff like that. And some people shared their experiences, and I think that helped promote inclusion. And from there, we decided to hold the mock selection. And then the mock selection was like a mini simulation of our selections, just so we could get members in the head game of selection. But what we did, we had like a mock list of people with major GPA, different organizations, whether they had a part-time job or not. And we had two candidates that were like, oh, they like, we would like, they needed, like, they fit the standard of scholarship, leadership, and service, because that's where our application goes off of. And they were like, oh, two people that fit those criteria, and like there's not like a lot of like wiggle room, so that could be voted in from the first ballot. And then you would have two people that you're like, most of the people that you wanted to be held in a discussion, why they should be a motorboard or what their engagement would look like. And if nobody's talking, we would always refer back to the discussion guidelines. And from the discussion guidelines, it would promote. But after like a one or two topic and having votings, people naturally got in the rhythm of it. And they were like, no, this person was president of this society. They also have a part-time job, and they have a pretty good GPA. And then you have a person with like, in our mock selection, that didn't have as high of scholarship, but they were involved in so many different communities and organizations on their campus. And then they were like, even though this person doesn't like have the like a high, like, like the highest GPA, look at like all the things they're doing, like their leadership on campus. And that's why this person deserves to be in. And it's just to get them in the mind of running things. And just so people were like, oh, that's why this person should be in, like off scholarship, leadership, and service. And then after that, it just snowballed after that for selections. It just took off. And that's all I gotta say, really. And it's all thanks to my like advisor. I would really thank her, Dr. Sally Stedman. That's what our chapter. She really helped me and guided me a lot.
We know we all love Sally at Mortarboard. And so, Wally, did you feel like by going through this process that you were able to select a much more diverse group of members for Mortarboard?
I think so. Looking at people in different organizations and what those organizations mean, and just looking at majors, like because because like because we had like some like higher majors represented than others, and we have a lot of majors in our campus, and then we were like, oh, okay, we need to look at majors because they bring in different ideas. Like everybody's not the same, and everybody like there's the English and math majors. They would never get to interact. So what's a better place to interact than be in mortarboard? So and just share that ideas and other things like that. And that's why like with our student outreach, referring back to that, we went to major specific organizations. Like for engineering, we went to American Society of Mechanical Engineers, American Society of Civil Engineers, American Institute of Chemical Engineers. We just spoke to those and just having that connection, and it's just promoting that diversity and sharing of ideas, and just giving everybody a fair chance at joining such a wonderful organization.
Thank you so much, Waleed. I would like to, there were some really good questions on the Whova app that we may have time to address, but I want to open it up right now to any questions from the group that's attending today for Gabriella, Tamika, Waleed, and even myself. So if someone's managing the chat, are there any questions that have come up? If not, I've got some great questions that came from Whova.
Alexander has his hand up.
Okay.
Hello. I love everything that was said. I've taken some notes actually for my own chapter, but I guess want to hear your ideas of how I could conquer sort of like deal with this sentiment that's kind of going around on my campus. Well, not just my campus, but I feel like just in general with everything that's going on. A lot of people are like, I'm tired of being bashed over the head with this like diversity stuff, things like that. And they're sort of they're kind of shutting away from sort of talking about those issues. And obviously with the recent ruling, I feel like that sentiment's growing a lot. And I guess sort of what would you suggest as like, a chapter for people on campus, and even possibly within the chapter who feel this way, how we can sort of amend that and sort of be like, okay, like, sort of deal with that while still holding true to being diverse, equitable, and inclusive.
So I also live in a red state, and so we have a lot of conflicts similar to that. And one thing that I think is important is that you are allowing every voice to be heard and to matter, but making sure that those voices are not being hateful to each other. So you may not be always able to come to a common ground of like the people who are like, I just don't want to be bombarded with all this DEI stuff or things like that, while also kind of standing your ground, being able to be like, well, part of what mortarboard is making sure that we are being inclusive and that people can feel like they belong in our group, and finding a place to exist where it's not a hateful space, where everyone can have a voice that matters and not be arguing, and be in a space of, if we can't reach understanding, maybe we can at least reach peace.
Thank you, Gabriella. Wise words. I just want to say this kind of addresses one of the questions. Let me just read the question that came off the Whova. So this is really right in line with your question. What actions can we take to support expansion of diversity and inclusion when there is controversy surrounding doing so? So I'm sorry. So Waleed or Tamika, would you like to weigh in on this?
I think I can real quick. So this is something that has plagued me as well. Especially this last year and a half, just kind of watching the political space and all of the changes. And I think I probably have asked this question to almost every guest speaker we've had at Mortarboard. I think I even posed a similar question to Bushra yesterday. And I liked her answer. It was really informative. I think for me, first, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and JEDI starts at the local level, kind of at the grassroots level. So just making sure like your own mortarboard and everything, your own organizations are focused on those efforts. But, you know, when dealing with the controversy and whatnot, I think it's kind of, and it all depends on one's, you know, desire to kind of how deep you want to go into it. As Bushra was saying, you know, social media has been a big part of kind of making voices stand out in the public space, and getting a lot of kind of change at least underway. So maybe utilizing like social media, maybe even something so simple as writing letters to like local congressmen, or, you know, and showing why you feel like this is maybe not the direction one would want to go in, or explaining why efforts in expanding DEI are so necessary given what's happening around in our space and how it's affecting you and other students and other individuals. So, I mean, I think it is kind of difficult, especially when you consider controversy and the backlash. I'm in school for education, and so CRT is also under fire as well. And, you know, I constantly am asking my advisors and my mentors, hey, like, how do we deal with the backlash? You know, it's great and everything to be taught about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and want to really expand that within our peripheral, within our space, and those that we interact with. But how do we deal with the backlash? And, you know, I was advised, you know, depending on where you stay, you know, in a red state, if it's going to be a little bit different, but also kind of arming yourself with your local laws, being really aware of what is allowed, what's allowed to be taken away, what's allowed for you, where is the space that you can kind of maneuver and operate in under the auspice of not having to kind of conform to maybe like newer laws or newer efforts to keep diversity, equity, and inclusion out of these atmosphere. I was telling one of my advisors that, you know, if you just change the name of diversity, equity, and inclusion, maybe it's not so controversial. Change it to something else, and just don't say DEI, but still do the things that are required to be effective under DEI. Just call it something different. So that was kind of like my takeaway. You know, to me, it's a lot of keywords get hung up on, you know, such as, you know, DEI, diversity, CRT, wokeness. So, you know, kind of maybe just changing terminology a little bit until those new terms catch on and get kind of protested against might be a valid effort too.
Thank you, Tamika. Waleed, do you have thoughts to share?
I mean, I'll just going off of what Tamika was saying. Yeah, like if you change the name of it, people would be for it. I guess it's because they're against the idea of it, not knowing that they're a part of it too. That's what like the inclusion is for. And it really, like, I remember like it first opened up my eyes when I went to conference last year, and I went to, I think it was like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it really opened up my brain to the idea of it, that it's more than just what people think it is. It's like somebody could be a mother, somebody, like it's just making everybody feel included and feeling like a part of a family. And, you know, and I guess we just got to make peace with it. You know, we argue with family, but I hope we all come to an understanding. Is this, you know, that's what I look forward to.
Great responses. And I think the thing, and the work that I did when I was working at Kansas State University, and I worked in our School of Leadership Studies, I taught a class on culture and context and leadership, and my students, because I was at a PWI, predominantly white institution, they said, well, it doesn't include me. And like Wally said, no, when you really look at diversity, equity, it's all of us. They want to pit us, you know, it's us against them. And if you really look at that, we all belong in this framework. And so, like Tamika says, we need to change the words, but I think that really great wisdom from our panelists as always. Student voices are the best. So thank you so much for that. Are there any other questions?
Andy, I think Randy, this is Carrick. I think Randy McKenzie brought up an interesting point about what do you do if you're on a campus where there is a overt lack of diversity? So it's how do you expand?
Well, and that's one of the questions I think that came off the HUVA board. It says, how can we promote DEI on campuses that have little diversity to begin with? So maybe that sort of goes in line with that question. So I will pose that question to our panel.
Okay, so I actually heard about mortarboard through tabling. So when Randy mentions tabling, that kind of takes me all the way back. And I will say seeing diverse members at tabling had me a lot more intrigued about coming over and possibly being involved. You walk past so many different options and everything starts to kind of look all the same. You don't know where to go and whatnot. But the one that stood out to me was kind of the one that seemed to be changing out members, and their members looked all different. They didn't look to be like just one type of individual. Like definitely wasn't, I couldn't join the lacrosse team organization or anything like that, because that's not what I do. But you know, just seeing the diversity out there, having the diversity outside where other diverse members can see it is absolutely powerful. Different organizations may already exist on campus that you may consider partnering with. I know my first semester as DEI chairman, I started going to all of the events being held by other organizations on campus, such as the Chicano Studies, African Diaspora, Africana Studies. I went to the undocumented resource event, students events, as well as the Indigenous persons grand opening and a lot of their discussions and events. So I started just giving support to other campus organizations that support diversity as well, letting them know who I was with, what our efforts were, and, you know, looking for ways to potentially, if possible, collaborate on different things and still kind of getting our voices out there while also alerting other students to what mortarboard has going on, and our efforts to expand diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think that's one of the ways that you could definitely look into doing it. I know Randy had also suggested if your campus has like an international student outreach program, even commuter service programs. I for one have, there's a commuter program at our school, a commuter service, and it's for the students who kind of live off campus, maybe have like jobs and children and other things going on in their life. So they're not living at campus, but it's just a space for them to kind of exist in and their hectic schedules where they can kind of throw their stuff down, because it's hard to find a space on campus when you're not already kind of there 24/7. And so just these different areas that you can kind of go into and maybe recruit different members and also let them know what you're into and finding out what different organizations are into as well.
Thanks, Tamika.
Our organization also does a lot of tabling, but unfortunately our members prior we didn't have a super diverse group to kind of do a physical showing of like our diversity. So we would try to attend things. There are a lot of reservations here in Montana. And so we would try to attend community events, even though it was not even with our college. There's also a community college in Missoula. And attending those community events may not have brought us a lot more students, but it showed our presence being involved with other people and getting to hear their voices and what was important to them in local government or what the college was working on, and hopefully gaining their interest in if they were students. Not familiar with the term tabling. Sorry, I got to start. For us, tabling, like when you think orientation, like when you're a freshman and you first go to college, we have a big oval on campus, and there's usually like a welcome event where you literally just set up a table and sit there and then tell people what your club is about. And lots of different clubs are typically there. And so it can be really overwhelming. And so you do want to try and do things here and there that are, that kind of separate your group and do promote that sense of belonging that people are looking for. But we found that community events can be especially powerful in that, because Montana, aside from our college towns, is a pretty white state.
Great advice, Gabriella, because your respective colleges and universities are part of a greater communities. What a great way to get out into your community and form alliances that way. Thank you. Great, great advice. Wally, do you have some words of wisdom to share with us?
I think they shared like the good points, and they allow and I don't know. I'm still thinking about that question. So
okay. You know, one of the things I think one of the questions says, what if you are at a small college or university, really there's not much diversity. So, you know, what can you do? How do we promote it? And I think, again, partnerships, alliances, find other groups that have the same interests. You can do, there are great movies, there are great books. You could have start with a book club, start with a movie night and have discussions that way. I think there's, you know, it's all about educating people. I think the more we educate people and share our voices and share our stories, we move the needle forward. So I think anything you can do with that, small steps, but find people who share your passion and vision as well.
I think I can, I just got the words in my head. So like what I did was, because our student organizations have to be registered. And I remember I went through our program and saw all the student organizations, whether they're verified or not. And that's a good way of outreach, because you could hit like a small group of people, but talking to that one person and getting to know them a little better, they can open up your horizon to something more. Because like attract like, so people usually talk to people that they're comfortable with, and you could just find one member of that group, then you could find, like, you know, because that member usually seeks other members in that group because they associate, like, you know, because they have common goals. And if you get access to that, and then that helps with your recruitment process and everything. And so, you know, and I think that's what, and then I remember when I was talking about, like, I remember when we did student outreach, I know the idea could be intimidating, going to talk to different organizations. That's what I was thinking about. And a good way is, you don't have to talk about it for long. Just talk about what mortarboard is to you and your favorite memories of mortarboard, and just and that's how they become engaged and want to be a part of it. They'll be like, oh my God, I want to be a part of that. Like I like that vision. I want to be a part of it. Because one of my favorite memories of mortarboard was during retreat. We had giant Jenga. We brought over, and we were playing giant Jenga, and retreat was over with, but our game of giant Jenga was still going on. And the people did not leave. The people were just like circling around us, seeing who's gonna win, because it was like a 5v5, and we were all taking turns seeing who was gonna win this game of giant Jenga. And then ever since then, giant Jenga has become a staple in all of our events. We always bring it because we associate it with such a good memory. Yeah, my team did lose, but you know, it was a valiant effort. It was a valiant effort, and I think, I don't know, just having that idea and that memory, is just I don't know. That's what mortarboard means to me. Just like belonging, because it was like a bunch of different majors, and we were just like arguing. Oh, they were arguing like, oh, because you're an engineer, you think you could do physics and all that. I was like, no, I can't. Like, you know, I'm a chemical, not a structural. And then it was just the debating back and forth, and it's just like light attracts light. And then if you get a giant Jenga set, you can also share them with other organizations, because we didn't even have our own. We bartered it from the Society of Civil Engineers, and that's a good way of outreach too. Be like, oh, what's mortarboard? They want to use our stuff, yeah, and then they get to use some of our stuff. You know, it's just having that sense of communication.
Thank you. Are there other questions? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I have one from Jane Hamblin in the chat I wanted to share. She says, how can mortarboard's push for DEIB transform the strength of a chapter on a campus, on your campus specifically, and on any campus generally? So how does DEIB transform the strength of the chapter on your campus?
I think for me, so I'm a new president coming in, so a lot of our DEIB work has been from our former president, and I've been doing a lot of learning and catching up about events and things like that. And honestly, having the policies and ideas from Mortarboard strengthens our chapter because we don't have to start at ground zero. And there's also lots of organizations nationwide that are working on this. So you don't need to start all on your own and come up with new things to do. There are a lot of ways already out there and a lot of plans in place to help you. And I think bringing that to your own campus also strengthens you when you do have kind of that that clash, or people who just want to pick a fight or things like that. And like, well, this is what my organization stands for. So if our club is going to be following Mortarboard and its policies and what it outlines for us, then this is how we're going to continue our club. And kind of having that as your solid ground helps go against that backlash and be able to stand your ground, and kind of strengthens your campus. And I think that can work generally too.
I think that absolutely, as Gabriella just said, a way I think it can also strengthen your chapter on campus and other campuses is, as I was saying, collaborating with other organizations, showing up for them, just leads to usually like Wally was saying, light attracts light. Other organizations, when they see your efforts at pushing for diversity, pushing to be a part of something bigger, they also want to be a part and supportive of you as well, and whatever your efforts are, allowing you therefore even maybe get new members, or even just be able to put on bigger events or more far-reaching events, and have a more far-reaching effect on the campus, by showing and putting your values and efforts up front and center, where the whole campus can kind of see, this is what we're about. And we would like to help all others, organizations as well, in their efforts to diversify and become more inclusive. And I think as we were saying, that just kind of attracts that sort of spirit to you through other advisors, possibly other organizations on campus, thereby strengthening you on that campus, and potentially others, because you never know where these students go or wind up later on, but they may also always be thinking about their experiences through Mortarboard or a conglomerate or a subsidiary of, Mortarboard's efforts.
Thank you.
I guess speaking about like how can it help with other chapters, I guess it's like going back as an example, when we had our Friendsgiving event, Friendsgiving was the day I joined the Indian Student Association. I was just talking to them. They were telling me like how to join the organization, everything. They were talking to me about their events and stuff. And I was like, I always heard about their events. And then they were like, because I usually go to like the Diwali and Holi, and I pay $5 up front. And then he was just like, oh, why are you paying to have fun when you could pay to be a member and you could come in for free and get a t-shirt? I was just like, oh my God. And then I was just like, I always wanted to be a part, but I didn't know how to like connect. And it was just, I don't know, I guess just sharing those ideas and stuff like that. I guess promotion helps, but yeah, go what Tamika was saying, referencing her.
I think, Wally, you bring a good point. I think sometimes people see the name of a student organization and thinks, I can't join that. But I think all student organizations are open to any student who has an interest. So I think that's really good to join all these student organizations. What a great way to expand your cultural awareness. Any other questions? Okay, well, I know our time. So there's this one last question I'm going to pose to the panel. And they've shared so much wisdom. And like I said, there are some great questions on Huva. I'm going to try to address some of them, but I would appreciate other people sharing your wisdom as well. And suggestions to these great questions that are on Whova. But for the panelists, so you've all had, it sounds like a really successful year. So, you know, if any chapter is looking to expand its inclusion and belonging efforts, what is one actionable item you would recommend that they do? Or maybe two, if you've got to share. So think about that. What's one or two actionable items a chapter can do to move forward?
I could go first. I would say it starts with the members, because it's like you know, it starts at the bottom of the pyramid. So and that's the members, and it would, like, once the members, they get to share the idea, they want to be engaged in their community, and once you select for that in your selections, and they help propel it forward, I guess, and then that's when, like, it'll start. It's like a snowball effect. Like, you have to start from somewhere, and I guess, like, starting from the members, making your members known why diversity, equity, and inclusion is important, and then off the members, you know, they can help with the outreach and talking to other student organizations and just sharing that idea, and then it's like expanding upon that. It's like it helps with their selection as well and everything. So if anything, it like, I am the change. So it starts with us, you know, just you as the individual.
Thank you.
For me, I would say one actionable item is promoting the bond within your own organization or your own chapter first. I feel that a much more bonded local chapter who enjoys spending time with each other or enjoys supporting each other, not just during meetings and whatnot. I think that makes a chapter that's much more likely and much more enthusiastic about overall goals and achieving those goals together, especially if those goals like include expanding like things like DEI. There's a lot more participation, I feel, when there is a stronger bond and rapport between chapter members. So I think efforts at basically improving the bond between local members, and then outside of the chapter, one actionable item, like we've kind of been saying, partnering with other organizations, collaborating with other organizations, going to their talks, their events, showing your support. If you have the members and your members have the time, maybe contacting like your student ability centers, if you have one, where a lot of students with living with disabilities, you know, need note takers a lot of the time. You can get little kind of groups of student volunteers maybe who are kind of just on hand to be kind of a volunteer pool maybe of your members to help out in areas around campus, such as, you know, maybe we can say, hey, we've got 5 note takers here. You know, we are mortarboard students, so we are academically inclined. And if any students in these classes are having trouble taking their notes, maybe we can volunteer to take their notes. These efforts and just showing kindnesses and doing things outside of the mortarboard to show that there's actions behind our words, I think is one actionable item that we can definitely do to improve ourselves.
Thank you, Tamika.
I think Tamika's right on when she's talking about having to kind of foster those connections within your group first. Having that good bond really does help. One actionable item that has come up on our campus a lot is we have had a lot of protests, a lot of marches on our campuses and in our local government. And it's no small thing to show up for other people, to attend those, to go to those, to learn at those events if you are not familiar with what's going on, to listen to what those people are saying and what they're protesting for. That's no small thing to have someone else's back. And that really kind of shows if you are able to do that in your own personal life and through an organization. Like, it really just kind of emulates through everything if you are able to have someone's back when they need it and when they are being threatened. I think that that's no small thing.
Well, great advice from our student panelists. Are there any other thoughts from the group that's watching today?
Yeah, I had a thought.
Okay, Shah.
I think when it comes to promoting diversity in mortarboard, one big element is also the leadership. I think we were talking what Wally was talking before was having them members be active in promoting diversity. That also comes down to the leaders. Like when the leaders are willing to listen to the members, that also helps create a big change. So I think it's important for the leadership to be open into having all kinds of people in mortarboards, so they can not only promote equality and diversity, but to also allow everyone the chance to be a part of something big.
Thank you, Shah. That's great wisdom. Listening. We need to listen more than talk a lot of times. So on behalf of the DEIB committee and mortarboard, we'd like to thank these really amazing panelists and their chapters for sharing their work with us today. We appreciate your intentionality and willingness and take concrete steps to make mortarboard stronger and more inclusive. We can't wait to see what you and all the other mortarboard chapters are going to accomplish this year. Thank you very much. And I just want to close with one of my favorite quotes. I think it encompasses why DEIB. It's from Wade Davis. You may not have known who he is. He's an anthropologist. And I have a poster that I framed and I hung in my office when I worked, now it's hanging in my home. And he says, "The world in which you were born is just one model of reality. Other cultures are not failed attempts at being you. They are unique manifestations of the human spirit." And I think in that vein, thank you again. And appreciate the panelists, appreciate those of you who Zoomed in with us. And thank you for the great questions. And look at those questions on Whova. I hope people will respond to some really excellent questions from our members out there. Thank you.
And thank you so much, Candy, for your leadership of the DEIB committee and your fabulous facilitation and the way you drew all of us in during this panel. And huge thank you to Gabriella, Walid, and Tamika. Your insights inspired me and gave me more tangible tips on how to better put actions to my advocacy in my sphere of influence. And I know our collegiate members got some amazing tips on how to make this kind of impact on their campus this coming year. So thank you so much. As Candy said, we cannot wait to see what you all will accomplish. And we hope that you'll not only accomplish those things, but share them with us through your reports, through posts on social media. Those are other ways to really show how important DEIB is to your local chapters and to the national organization. So now I'd love to call back our conference advisory board member, Julia Sharp, for an update quickly before we head to our next break.